A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. I want A+ English because it's so much fun. English education for you and everyone, so come along. Learn some grammar, learn a phrase, learn something new every day. Learn the A+ way. Hey, it's time to start the show. Are you ready? Good, 'cause here we go. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. I want A+ English.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to A+ English. I'm Pat.
I'm Elsie.
And we're talking about structures for stories. We've mentioned them in movies, but of course they can also be in books. Any kind of story has some kind of structure.
Right.
And our warm-up question is, do you like to write stories? Why or why not?
Okay, as you know, I don't like to write stories. Why not? Because I don't think I have enough great ideas.
Well, you don't need great ideas.
I
You
don't
just
have
tell them well.
imagination.
That does help when writing stories. Of course, I love writing stories. It's one of my main hobbies. I've had some published in different books and magazines. So, yep, 100% I love to write stories. Why? I can't explain why. I have to do it. Yeah, it's so much fun to do. It's great to build things and get your ideas out and think about different things and characters and situations. I've just been doing it so long since I was a kid, I don't know how to stop.
And you just love it.
Yeah, it's just so much fun. But when we do stories, we need a structure. We've looked at a 3-act structure. In today's article, we're going to look at 2 different story structures. Let's check them out.
Want to make a great movie? Think about these story types. Warm-up question. Do you like to write stories? Why or why not?
Multiple timeline structure. The multiple timeline structure is one of the most complicated. It's not recommended for new writers. This structure actually uses 2 stories. Sometimes they connect together and sometimes they don't. The stories might happen at different times, in different places, and have different people. The Hours is an example of a movie that uses this structure. Fabula-sujet structure. This structure comes from Russia. Fabula is the main story and sujet is the narration. Usually, stories with this structure show the end first. They then go back to the beginning to show everything to that point. This structure is very effective in Forrest Gump.
So the article starts by going straight into our second structure, multiple timeline structure.
今天呢要介绍的第2个结构就是多重时间线结构。
The article says the multiple timeline structure is one of the most complicated. So 3-act is basic, multiple timeline is complicated.
OK， 那这边我们看到的 the most complicated 最复杂的，好，这个最高级在 day 1的时候已经出现过了，形容词的最高级用法，这边在 the most 加在 complicated 的前面。再来呢，我们要先进到 Magic Box 听讲师讲解最高级的组合用法咯。
Magic Box。
大家好，我是星座专家唐启阳，今天呢就来分析一下星座之最哦。哪个星座最浪漫？哎呀，提到浪漫，怎么可能不讲这个星座呢？Pisces is one of the most romantic among all the zodiac signs. 在星座中呢，双鱼座绝对是最浪漫的其中一个，绝对会提到它啦。不止星座呢要比较谁最怎样，其实啊，这样的用法在我们日常生活中也很常看到，是什么用法呢？就是形容词的最高级了。 最高级呢，顾名思义呢，就是最怎么样的。那既然有最，它呢一定是在3人或者是3人以上的团体里面来做比较了。如果呢是2人的话，我们就用比较级就好了。比方说呢 ，I'm taller than her，OK， 我比她高，而不是使用最高级了。那最高级形容词呢，通常结尾呢都会是 est， 例如呢 tallest 最高的 ，highest 最高的，或者是呢像是音节很长的，像是 beautiful 这个形容词呢，我们就在前面加上 most beautiful 最美丽的。那再来呢，造句的时候呢，通常我们的这个形容词最高级前面呢会加上 the。为什么需要 the？ 因为呢它是最怎么样的？无人能及哦，只有他一个，所以呢，我们就需要指定咯。我们呢来看一个句子吧，比方说啊，3兄弟里面，你觉得谁最帅呢？I think Nick is the most handsome of the 3 brothers. 3兄弟当中呢，我觉得 Nick 是长得最帅的。注意到呢 ，the most handsome 句子里面呢，我们就用到了这个最高级的形容词了。那后面呢，我们就可以加上 of， 或者是呢另外一个字 among，OK， 然后呢再加上比较的这个范围，例如在这边我们是比较这3兄弟 ，OK， 那这样子呢，我们就形成一个完整的句子咯。那最高级的只能有一个吗？你还记不记得开头我说双鱼座是最浪漫的之一？为什么呢？因为其实像这个双子座啊、射手座啊也都很浪漫啊，所以最高级呢也适用在一个群体哦。这个群体呢是所有群体之中最怎么样的。这个时候呢，我们要说这个人事物是最怎么样的之一，那就要使用 one of 的用法咯。比方说呢 ，This necklace is one of the most expensive pieces of jewelry in the world. 哇，这条项链呢是世界上最昂贵的珠宝之一。或者是呢说 ，She is one of the richest people in the world. 或是呢，我们可以说呢，她是世上最富有的人之一。OK， 最高级呢就可以这样子来搭配群体了。我们要说呢，之一呢，记得我们就要加上 one of 的 ，OK， 最高级的形容词，再加上群体，最高级、最怎么样这群人里面的之一。OK， 以上呢就是形容词最高级的2种用法。最聪明的你，一定呢已经学会了。
好啦，所以我们说这个多重时间线结构是最 complicated、最复杂的。
Right, we could also say, this math class is too complicated. I don't understand anything.
Don't worry, I can't help you.
Oh, well.
OK， 所以呢，这个不推荐给新手写，是不是 ？It's not good for new writers?
Right, the article says it's not recommended for new writers. If you're going to tell a story for the first time, start with a one character and just do everything that happens all the way to the end of the story. Don't try to mix in lots of different characters, seeing what they're doing, what they're doing, what they're doing. They should all be, if they're all together, that's fine. But if one's over here and one's in a different part of the country and they're both having stories, it gets very complicated to try and balance what you're writing.
OK， 那我们看到这个课文说 it's not recommended， 也就是不被推荐给新手使用。那 recommended 这个动词这边当做的是被动使用哦，代表推荐建议。那原形动词是 recommend， you can recommend somebody do something， 推荐某人做某事。
Like if A+ English is too easy for you, I recommend you try reading English for You.
没错，那这边说到呢，我们的新手不适合用多重时间线结构来写故事，为什么？
Well, the answer is this structure actually uses 2 stories, or perhaps 3 or 4 or more stories.
Okay, no wonder it's so complicated. 所以呢，多重时间线结构呢，使用的是2个故事，或刚 Pat 说可能有3个、4个、5个。那我们先来看一下，这边有一个副词是 actually. What does it mean? Let's find out. Actually 这个副词呢，代表实际上、事实上，那它可以放在句首、句中、句尾。那在课文里面呢，放的就是句中的位置。 For example, actually, I don't know much about him. 事实上，我不太认识他。这个就是放在句首的例句咯。那再给同学们一个放在句尾的。His friends didn't have fun at the party, actually. 其实啊，他的朋友不觉得派对好玩。那单字例句给的是呢 I'm polite to Ingrid, but I actually don't like her very much. 我对 Ingrid 很有礼貌，但是我其实不喜欢她。
And here's another example. I may look young and handsome, but I'm actually 40.
You don't look 40.
Well, we'll see. So, multiple timeline structure has two, sometimes more stories, and the article says sometimes they connect together and sometimes they don't.
Connect 这个动词是连接 So sometimes they're connected together, but sometimes they don't. Okay, 所以有时候不是连接的状态。
So we could say all the Marvel movies connect to each other to make one big story in the Avengers films.
So they're connected.
Exactly.
所以这边说到呢，多重时间线结构所使用的两个故事，有的时候是相连，有的时候不是。
So we also see the stories might happen at different times, in different places, and have different people.
所以故事可能在不同的时间发生，不同的地点，或者是里面的人也有可能不同。那我们这边看到不同的这个形容词 different 怎么用呢？来看一下吧。Different 这个形容词呢，代表不同的。那我们很常看到 different kinds of 的用法，那就是不同种类的。For example, he planted different kinds of flowers in the garden. 代表他在花园里面种了不同种类的花。那另外呢，名词形式是 difference 代表差异差别，所以 A、B 两者之间的差异是什么？我们可以怎么问呢？ What's the difference between A and B? So for example, what's the difference between a goat and a sheep? 山羊和绵羊有什么不同？那单字例句给的是呢 There are so many different cakes in the shop. Can I have a strawberry one? 店里有好多不同的蛋糕，我可以点一块草莓的吗？So
we could say my brother and I mostly like different sports, but we both enjoy soccer. So what kind of movies have this multiple timeline structure? The article says The Hours is an example of a movie that uses this structure.
探讨生死的这部电影呢，时时刻刻就是用这个手法写成的。
Another one is one Elsie mentioned yesterday. We talked about the Godfather trilogy. The second Godfather one, there's the story that takes place in the present with Michael in Florida and Nevada and so on. And then there's another one in the past with Michael's father that takes place in Italy and New York. And the characters never meet. They're different, mostly different people. So it's a very difficult balance to keep the two stories running together.
What about the movie Inception?
That's just complicated.
Just complicated.
Yeah, it's a single act structure, but it's got lots of different things happening.
I never understand that movie.
Okay, well, let's see if we understand this third structure. And we're going to get the name wrong because it's a difficult name to pronounce. It's called the Fabula Sujet, I think. Fabula Sujet structure.
也就是这个 fabula sujet 结构
Right.
我们可能发音是不对的，因为这个是 Russian.
Exactly. So these words, and as the article says, this structure comes from Russia.
Come from 这个片语就是来自于，像是我会说 I come from Taiwan 或者是 I'm from Taiwan.
Yeah, and I come from England, sushi comes from Japan, and so on.
那这样子的叙事结构呢，是来自 Russia 来自俄罗斯的。
So what do these two words mean? Well, fabula is the main story, and syojet, whatever, is the narration.
OK, 所以是两个不同的部分哦。Fabula 它是主要的故事，那 S 开头的那个字，它是叙述的技巧。那这边呢，我们看到 main 这个形容词代表什么意思呢？ Take a look.Main 这个形容词代表的是主要的，那像是我们的故事、小说或者是电影里面都要有主要角色，主角就是 main characters。那再来呢，入口处我们说是 at the main entrance。 那另外啊，我们吃饭的时候呢，如果是到餐厅去，可能有前菜，还有主餐，主餐就是 main course。那文章里面的主旨，我们说的是 main idea。那单词例句给的是呢 Sandra went to the town's main hospital because it has many doctors. Sandra 前往镇上最大的医院，因为那边有很多的医生。
Or I could say, my main dish is a bowl of noodles, but I also got some vegetables and tofu as side dishes.
那再来呢，我们还看到一个名词哦，是 narration 叙述的技巧。
Yeah, this is an important part of stories because it's how the story is told and who is telling it. Think of the Sherlock Holmes stories. The narration is by Dr. Watson. We're finding out what Dr. Watson sees and does and feels, not what Sherlock Holmes thinks, which is good because if we knew what he thinks, we'd know the answers right away. Whereas with Watson, he doesn't understand it, so he only finds out at the end.
So it's from his point of view.
Exactly, it's all about point of view. We see in the article, usually stories with this structure show the end first.
通常呢，这样的叙事结构呢，结尾会先出现，所以像是倒叙法一样。
Right, and then the article says they then go back to the beginning to show everything to that point.
That point 代表那个时间点，也就是结尾的那个时间点。
That is interesting. That point means point in time. So they go, okay, if this is where we are now, we're now going to go back and show you everything that led up to where we are now. We could also say, up until this point in the story, I thought that character was a good guy. Then he did something bad.
所以这样的叙事结构呢，结尾出现之后，再回去叙述开头、中间，一路到那个时间点之前的 everything 所有事情。
Okay, so where can we see an example of this story? We see in the article, this structure is very effective in Forrest Gump.
阿甘正传
Yeah.
就是用这样子的 structure。
Right, he starts on the bench and he's telling the other person about his life, leading up to why he's sitting on the bench right now.
Right, 所以呢，我们说 this structure is very effective. Effective 这个形容词什么意思呢？ Let's find out. Effective 这个形容词代表起作用的、有效的，所以一个有效的方法，我们可以说 an effective way 或是 an effective method。那一个有效的解决办法会是 an effective solution。那另外呢，有效的治疗方式也可以用它来形容 an effective treatment。单词例句给的是呢 This medicine is very effective at fighting your health problem. It will make you feel better soon. 这样子的药呢，对解决你的健康问题非常有效，它很快会让你感觉好一些。
We could also say, Elsie's lessons are very effective. Students can learn a lot from her.
Thank you, Pat. 那故事最后，课文最后说到的是呢，这样子的叙事法在《阿甘正传》里面相当实用，达到很棒的效果。
There are other stories that use this. The Greek story, The Odyssey, uses a bit as a guy kind of is found on a beach and they say, what happened to you? And he says, I've been lost at sea for 10 years. Let me tell you about all my adventures. And then after he's told them all the story, there's a bit more where he goes home and finds his wife and his son and everything. But a lot of the first part of that story is him telling his audience, for 10 years I've had these adventures and met these monsters and this bad luck and all that kind of stuff.
没错，所以中文我们说的这个倒叙法，就是现在我们介绍的第三种写故事的手法。
Okay, now the best way to kind of show you some more examples of how these stories work is to do our review time similar to what we did yesterday and look at a story from these two different structures. So let's go to our review time right now.
Review time.
So let's see if we can do Goldilocks and the Three Bears again using the multiple timeline structure. So we've got two timelines, one for Goldilocks, one for the bears. So we'd probably start with the bears go out of their house. Okay, and Goldilocks then finds the house.
所以是两个时间轴，一边是 Goldilocks， 一边是 Bears。
Right, so the only connection at the moment is the house. So then she does her stuff and eats the porridge and breaks the chairs. Okay, meanwhile, what are the bears doing?
They're walking
They're just out walking.
in the forest.
Yep.
Maybe.
Then Goldilocks finds the beds and goes to sleep, and the bears come home again. They decide, we've walked enough, let's go home. And at that point, the two timelines come together, and we have the end of the story where the bears find Goldilocks, they scare her, and all of that stuff happens. So that's how we could do a multiple timeline one.
没错，那还有一个 What about that Russian one?
Oh, that one could be a bit complicated.
erase.
Okay, so this is the Fabula Shojet structure. So there are two ways we could do this. Remember, we start at the end of the story.
没错，是用倒叙法，结尾先出现。
So it's all about who is the narration by. Remember, this starts with the narration before at the end of the story. So do we have Goldilocks telling the story?
How about the Bears?
Or the bears? Because if the bears are telling the story, then they maybe are reporting to the police and saying, police, we just got home and then we found all this stuff happening.
Yeah,
so
someone broke into our house.
yeah, so that, and then you go back to the start and they say we went out for the walk, we got home, there was Goldilocks in our bed, and then we came to talk to you. So that's how it starts, and then they bring it all the way back to where they are now.
没错。
If it's Goldilocks, she's probably talking to her mom when she gets home. She's run away from the bears and she says, oh, I found this house and I ate the porridge and I broke the chairs and I slept in the bed.
And I
Then
saw the Bears.
The bears came
home, yeah.
and so I ran and that's where I got home to tell you, Mom, all of this story. So that's how you would do it with the fabulous Shojet, however you pronounce its structure. So there are three different ways, in fact there are more ways if we think about it, of telling the Goldilocks story depending on the structure you want to use.
没错, so you guys can try writing stories in different structures.
Exactly. Have a bit of fun with it. Play with things and see what works out. But that's all the time we've got. Thanks for watching today. For A+ English, I'm Pat.
I'm Elsie.
And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Want to make a great movie? Think about these story types. Warm-up question. Do you like to write stories? Why or why not?
Multiple timeline structure. The multiple timeline structure is one of the most complicated. It's not recommended for new writers. This structure actually uses two stories. Sometimes they connect together and sometimes they don't. The stories might happen at different times, in different places, and have different people. The Hours is an example of a movie that uses this structure. Fabula Sujet structure. This structure comes from Russia. Fabula is the main story and sujet is the narration. Usually, stories with this structure show the end first. They then go back to the beginning to show everything to that point. This structure is very effective in Forrest Gump.
Word power.
Actually. Actually. I'm polite to Ingrid, but I actually don't like her very much. I'm polite to Ingrid, but I actually don't like her very much. Different. Different. There are so many different cakes in the shop. Can I have a strawberry one? There are so many different cakes in the shop. Can I have a strawberry one? Maine. Maine. Sandra went to the town's main hospital because it has many doctors. Sandra went to the town's main hospital because it has many doctors. Effective. Effective. This medicine is very effective at fighting your health problem. It will make you feel better soon. This medicine is very effective at fighting your health problem. It will make you feel better soon.
认识字汇
Complicated. Complicated. Recommend. Recommend. Connect. Connect.